and welcome to All In. I'm Julian, and today we're going to be exploring what I think is one of the most baffling paradoxes in the video game industry. I'm going to tell you a story of a franchise that has among its entries one of the best games of all time. A franchise that lends its name to an entire genre and redefined what a video game can be. A franchise owned by Nintendo, a company that continually breathes new life into old IPs. And yet, despite all these things working in its favor, the future of this franchise is up in the air, and nobody really knows what to expect from the next game. So roll yourself up into a nice, cozy ball because today we're going to talk about Metroid. Now, first, I'm going to tell you a deep, dark secret of mine, and you have to promise to still think I'm cool after, okay? Great. I did not play any Metroid games growing up. In fact, I didn't play them until recently. Like 2017 recently. It just never happened for me. But not too long ago, I was dating a girl and she told me her favorite game of all time was Super Metroid. I confessed to her that I'd never played it, and I told her I understood if she wanted to see other people. She suggested I pick up a Super NES Classic instead. So I did. And I played Super Metroid for the first time 23 years after its release. Now, why am I telling you all of this? Because I need you to understand that what I'm about to say has absolutely no tint of rose coloring from childhood nostalgia. This game is incredible. Super Metroid is simultaneously a sequel and a remake. The story picks up right after the second installment, but it tells almost an identical story to the original. The hero character, Samus Aran, is on the same planet, fighting the same space pirates who are trying to weaponize the same parasitic organisms called Metroids with the goal of galactic domination. Right at the start, you even retread the same ground where the final boss fight in the first game took place. Don't let that fool you though. Super Metroid is still a massive leap forward, perfecting a formula that was developed thanks more to accident and necessity than to a grand design vision. Okay, let's backtrack. When the original Metroid was in development in the mid-80s, the game's designers found themselves at odds with the hardware and software at their disposal. They wanted to create something inspired by the film Alien, but the game's available memory was seriously limited, and they were not allowed to make major changes to the engine. Yoshio Sakamoto, who joined the project just 3 months before its August 1986 release date, described it as like being stuck between high walls. Getting out would take some creativity. One way to squeeze more out of the game's memory was to design the map so that the same areas could be revisited, but still offer something new as the player progressed. Maybe a weapon Samus acquires, like an ice beam, could freeze enemies and turn them into platforms, granting access to a new part of the map. Or another weapon could blow a hole in a wall for Samus to crawl through. But animating a crawling character is difficult, and movement animations eat up a lot of memory. How about Samus acquires the ability to morph into a ball and roll through the opening instead? These space-saving choices combine to lay the groundwork of what would become an entire genre of games known as Metroidvanias, characterized by dense maps that open up with a story and reward exploration rather than just pressing right until you find a princess. Some other defining features of the Metroid franchise were decided on a whim, like Samus's gender. Up until the final stage of development, the assumption was Samus would be a man. After all, the character was named after Brazilian soccer superstar Pelé, or at least what one designer thought was Pelé's real name. It wasn't. The team figured people would play the game over and over, and they wanted different endings to reward faster clear times. One idea was for Samus to remove their helmet, and someone thought it would be a real surprise if Samus was a woman. Now, keep in mind, this was the mid-80s, and unlike today, female video game protagonists were few and far between. The team liked the idea, and just like that, they stumbled onto an iconic character. Which brings us back to where we started, to 1994, when Super Metroid gave Sakamoto a chance to do it all again. This time, however, instead of being limited by the game's memory, Sakamoto decided to push Nintendo's newest console to its limits. The map was bigger, more weapons were added, bosses grew from tiny sprites to towering two-room behemoths. Samus could aim her arm cannon diagonally, it had it all. The end result was the largest game released for the Super Nintendo up to that point, filling up its cartridge at a massive 24 megabytes. And yet, despite its huge size, it was a tightly executed masterpiece. The world gave players a sense that they were in charge of its exploration, even as it subtly guided them in the right direction. Backtracking never felt like a chore. Actually, getting a new tool and realizing where to use it was thrilling. The story was told entirely through the environment, with no text boxes interrupting the experience. A lot of retro games come with the caveat that they were good in their day. Not Super Metroid. Super Metroid is as excellent today as it was more than 2 decades ago. It's almost too good. In some ways, Metroid has been a victim of its own success. Attempting to recapture the magic with other 2D side-scrollers have been good. Really good, actually. Metroid Fusion and a remake of the original called Metroid Zero Mission were fine installments for the Game Boy Advance, and the 2017 remake of Metroid 2 for the 3DS was well received. And yet, they still don't measure up to Super Metroid. The only games that came close were the ones that, at a glance, looked the most radically different. With the launch of the GameCube, Nintendo handed the keys to the franchise over to the US-based Retro Studios. Their 2002 game, Metroid Prime, made the map 3D and changed the perspective to first person. It managed to keep the soul of a Metroid game intact while still innovating, like adding new morph ball mechanics and special visors that revealed more information. Just like Super Metroid, Metroid Prime holds up all these years later. And just like Super Metroid, the 2 Metroid Prime sequels were really good, but not great. 2010 marked the last console release of a Metroid game, Metroid Other M. Sakamoto returned to lead development, but for some reason decided to make it focused more on action than exploration. Sakamoto also strayed from the genre he helped create by limiting what players could do, not through carefully thought out level design and story progression, but because of arbitrary restrictions placed on Samus by another character. It leaned heavily on cutscenes, which may be necessary to tell a more complex story, but they turned Samus from Sigourney Weaver in Alien into Bill Paxton in Aliens. The game felt like an imposter in Samus's armor, and it was not well received. Suddenly, the future of this legendary franchise was in doubt. At E3 2017, fans were teased with the promise that Metroid Prime 4 was in the works for the Nintendo Switch, and that's it. The last major news about the project was in January of 2019, when Nintendo announced they had scrapped what they had so far, and Retro Studios was taking the lead again. So, what can we expect? Will it be another experiment gone awry like Other M? Will it be a solid installment that doesn't quite rise to the lofty heights of its predecessors? Or will lightning strike a third time when all the ingredients that make a great Metroid game are combined with some new X factor that rejuvenates the formula? Nobody knows, but at least while you wait, you can always play Super Metroid again. Oh, and if I may backtrack just one more time, that girl who recommended Super Metroid to me? Well, let's just say I discovered the gold ring power-up. Now, I'm not saying I married her because of Super Metroid, but I'm not saying that either. Thanks for watching. I'm Julian Huguet. If you like this video, give me a follow on Instagram, Twitter, or Twitch at HugItOut.